Before I start this story, I just want you to know that it's for educational purpose and I mean no disrespect to anyone that I talk about in this case, and I upload once or twice a week. Cassie Jo Stoddart was born just a few days before Christmas on December 21, 1989, in Idaho, to her mother, Ann. Cassie has two siblings. Christy, who was 6 years older, and Andrew, who was 18 months younger. She came from a loving family. They were kind, open, and enjoyed being in each other's company. This extended to Cassie's demeanor. She was quickly able to make friends with anyone. She was intelligent and ambitious. She wanted to attend college someday. Cassie's brother, Andrew, described her as headstrong and a role model. He remembers spending a lot of time with her as they were 1.5 years apart in age. They hung out at a lot of the same places and were involved in the same interests. She was an artist as well, spending hours a week in her room listening to music and drawing. Andrew says that their mother still keeps several of her pieces up around the house. According to her natal chart, Cassie was likely a restless soul who sought adventure and connection. She had an unwavering faith in others. She was an idealist with big dreams. She was easygoing and loved to laugh. Sympathetic and concerned for others, she found strength in numbers, preferring to have someone by her side. Cassie was a radiant beacon of light, that much is clear. She deserved so much out of life and she had so much left to give. In this article, we will explore the events that stole the future of this young woman. The night was warm on September 22, 2006, when Cassie left to house sit for her aunt and uncle, Allison and Frank Contreras, over the weekend. The beautiful home is located on West Whispering Cliffs Drive in Bannock County. Cassie was in charge of caring for their 3 cats and 2 dogs. Cassie was responsible and caring, so this was a great opportunity for her. She invited her boyfriend, Matt Beckham, to join her. It was the perfect opportunity to spend some time together, and it eased her worries of being alone in an empty house in a remote suburb. They planned to watch a couple of movies. He arrived at 6 p.m., just before sunset. According to police records, it was both Matt and Cassie that invited Draper to the residence. He then invited Adamcik. For the couple, the night seemed like it was really gearing up to be a good one shared with friends. Once Draper and Adamcik arrived around 7 p.m., Cassie gave everyone a tour of the house. This included the basement. During this time, Draper made sure that the basement door was unlocked so they could enter the home later, unbeknownst to Cassie or her boyfriend. The group then sat down to watch Kill Bill, Volume 2, but before the end of the movie, Draper stated that he and Adamcik had to leave. They stated that they wanted to watch a movie at the local theater instead. They said their goodbyes and disappeared into the night at around 10 p.m. Rather than go to the theater, Draper and Adamcik parked down the street, out of sight. The car settled down as the keys were removed from the ignition. In the darkness, the young men dressed in what could only be considered a costume, consisting of dark clothing, gloves, and masks. The pair had their knives they'd purchased from the pawnshop just a few weeks before. Their hands were probably shaking with anticipation. Their recordings during this time and after the murder are fueled by their unbelievable excitement. They entered the home through the unlocked basement door while Cassie and her boyfriend were upstairs still watching TV. Then, they attempted to lure the pair downstairs by making loud noises. The pair wanted to instill fear in their victims before the killing. This shows their malicious intent. They were so lost in the idea that this was more of a movie rather than reality. But Cassie and Matt were not convinced that the noises were anything worth investigating. When they didn't come down to the basement, the pair moved to more direct measures. They flipped the entire circuit breaker, plunging the home into darkness. This didn't convince the couple to go downstairs either. Adamcik and Draper then turned on some of the lights, not all though. Despite their efforts to remain calm, Cassie began to feel uneasy after the temporary power outage. This was made worse when Beckham noticed one of the Contreras dogs was staring down the basement steps. They barked and growled into the darkness. Beckham decided to call his mother to ask if he could stay the night to make Cassie feel better. He noticed her discomfort and didn't want to leave her there alone. However, his mother rejected the idea, and instead, offered for Cassie to stay with their family for the night. But Cassie, reliable as ever, declined the offer, saying that she'd been trusted with the responsibility of watching over the pets and house. She couldn't just abandon everything because she was a little unsettled. At 10:30, Beckham's mom picked him up. He called Adamcik to see where he and Draper went. He hoped to hang out with them. However, when Adamcik picked up, his voice was so low and quiet that Beckham had a hard time hearing him and thus believed they were in the theater as they had stated earlier in the night they would be. Adamcik and Draper heard Beckham leave. At last, they could fulfill their sick fantasy. They began again by shutting off the power to the house once more. Again, Cassie refused to go downstairs. This time, the boys made their way up the staircase, slowly slinking closer to their prey, because that's what she was to them. Despite her belief that they were all friends, these two boys saw her as nothing more than a means to an end. An end to their anonymous, mediocre life. They stalked her that night. Cassie was laying on the couch in the living room at this point. Her heart was likely thumping in her chest, too wound up for sleep after such an anxiety-inducing night. At last, the pair had made it up the stairs. In their direct line of sight was their victim. One of them proceeds to slam the door behind them, breaking the terrifying silence with a bang. This is a nightmare of so many, and I can only imagine how terrifying this would have been for Cassie, who was already uneasy. In the filtered darkness, the two approached her, donning their eerie costumes. They brutally attacked her with 2 hunting knives. Cassie was stabbed 30 times. Later, it would be known that nearly half of the wounds were potentially fatal. In the footage captured after the murder, Adamcik and Draper discussed the experience. Draper even admitted on film that they killed Cassie. Adamcik then replied that he was shaking. Draper waved off his friend's nerves with the idea that they would now go and buy their movie tickets in an attempt to create an alibi. They convinced themselves that they were going to be more prolific than Ted Bundy, that their actions would honor the murderers they looked up to, like Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, known for the Columbine High School massacre. Adamcik was so conceited and cruel that just several hours after murdering Cassie, he spent the day with her boyfriend. He'd planned to kill Matt as well if he'd stayed the night. Yet Adamcik was acting as if nothing had occurred. 2 days passed without anyone hearing from Cassie. No one could have imagined the horrors that awaited the Contreras upon their return home on September 22. The first person to discover Cassie was her 13-year-old cousin. Cassie was found in a pool of her own blood with around 30 deep lacerations and stab wounds. Cassie's brother, Andrew, recalled the day her body was discovered in an interview. He was 15 at the time and staying the night with a friend. He made several attempts to reach his mother so she could pick him up, but she didn't answer. He could convince himself that this was rational. Maybe his mom just hadn't answered. It was explainable. So, his friend's parents drove him home, but no one was there. He could no longer ignore that sinking feeling in his stomach. Confused and anxious to understand just what was going on, he waited at his house until his uncle eventually picked him up. Everyone who held the answers to the mystery that was unfolding were back at the Contreras home. The sickening ache in his middle must have been exasperated by the presence of police surrounding the house as the pair pulled up to the Whispering Cliffs residence. Neighbors and family were huddled outside, crying. Only stopping for a moment to look at the frightened child who'd just arrived. Amidst the crowd was a familiar face though. Andrew's stepfather made eye contact with him as he was slowly making his way through the tearful crowd. One of the mourners mentioned to him that he had to tell the 15-year-old what happened. Someone had to. When Andrew joined him at last, he struggled through his own tears as he told the boy that someone had done something awful to his older sister. The Contreras and their children were relocated during the investigation. Police began their investigation by interviewing Matt Beckham, Cassie's boyfriend. This is the standard for most interrogations: look at those closest to the victim. He told them about everything that occurred that night, including mentioning the pair of boys who hung out with them briefly. This led investigators to question Adamcik and Draper next. Detectives visited the Adamcik home on September 24 for the first interview. Sean Adamcik was present for this. This would be the first of 2 interviews investigators would give the younger Adamcik. He told the detectives that he and Draper went to the Whispering Cliffs residence expecting a party, but when it became apparent that a party was not going to occur, the pair left to see a movie at a theater in Pocatello. He was unable to describe the movie or its plot, though. Not interested in furthering that story, Adamcik finished up by saying he and Draper went to his house for the rest of the night. Draper's first interview was not recorded because he was not yet in custody. He told police that he and Adamcik went to see a movie at a theater after leaving the Whispering Cliffs residence. He said they arrived too late for the movie they originally wished to see, but quickly decided to stay anyway to watch Pulse. However, he couldn't explain the plot at all. He then wrote out a description of what happened that night before leaving the station. On the evening of September 26, investigators brought in Draper for his second interview. This time, the interrogation was more serious. Despite Draper maintaining his original story, an officer stated that he didn't believe they'd watched a movie. Draper then said the pair were going through cars in the parking lot to steal items. Police didn't believe this either. Still, Draper was able to go home with his parents. Suspicions grew of the young man and a detective was sent to search the Draper home. They'd hoped to find items connected to Cassie and her murder, like gloves. The investigator discovered an empty knife sheath. When he asked the young man about it, he stated that the knife belonged to his friend and that's likely where the knife was at now. A third interrogation occurred the following day, September 27. Draper was joined this time by his parents. He admitted that he and Adamcik had unlocked the basement door so they could break into the house later that night, but he was adamant that they only did this to scare Cassie. He did state that they brought masks, gloves, black clothing, and knives to assist them, knowing just how terrifying the idea of 2 costumed assailants would be without murder involved. His confession didn't end there. He told investigators that once they went upstairs, Adamcik began to stab Cassie. Draper believed his friend was simply trying to scare him, but he soon realized the truth of their excursion at the residence. They were going to commit murder. He stated that he never touched, let alone stabbed, Cassie. He said he watched as Adamcik killed the young woman. He claimed that earlier that day, Adamcik had threatened to kill him if he spoke of the upcoming incident. And, in a last-ditch effort to save his own skin, Draper agreed to show the investigators where the pair hid the evidence. Draper and his father were joined by several investigators in the Black Rock Canyon area as the youngest led them to the site. The items recovered included a book of matches, a melted hydrogen peroxide bottle, 1 pair of blue gloves, 1 pair of black boots, 1 pair of fingerless gloves, 1 multicolored mask, 1 large dagger-type knife with a sheath, 1 silver and black-handled knife with Sloan written on the blade. Notice this knife does not have a sheath. 1 small dagger-type knife with a sheath, 1 Sony videotape, 1 black-handled serrated folding knife. Later DNA testing revealed that Stoddart's blood was present on this knife. A partly burned piece of paper with writing in pencil, described below. 1 red and white mask. Later DNA testing revealed a partial DNA profile of Adamcik on the mask. 1 single black glove. Later DNA testing revealed a partial DNA profile from an unknown male. A pair of partially burned black Puma brand gloves. Later DNA testing revealed that Cassie's blood had soaked into these gloves. 1 blue plastic garbage bag. A partially burned black long-sleeved Hager brand dress shirt. A Calvin Klein black dress shirt. Later DNA testing revealed that Stoddart's blood was present on the shirt cuff. 1 white and gray sock. A small piece of black cord. The partially burned note found was difficult to read, but it is believed that this could have been a note shown in one of the recordings from September 22. Some of the legible parts mention killing both Matt and Cassie. Detectives had Adamcik and his parents come down to the Pocatello police station so Adamcik could undergo his second interview. He reiterated a clearer version of the story he originally told them. He and Draper arrived at the Whispering Cliffs residence at 8 to 8:30. They toured the house before watching a portion of Kill Bill, Volume 2. Then, they left at 10 o'clock. From here, they began to break into cars. Throughout their attempted burglaries, Adamcik tried to make contact with Matt Beckham several times. The final time, Matt picked up and said his mother was taking him home. At 11:30, the pair went to Adamcik's and didn't leave again for the remainder of the night. Detectives had discovered that witnesses saw the pair at a local convenience store later than that. They bring this up with Adamcik. He quickly counters that they had to get matches for Draper, who smoked cigarettes. With some more questioning, he admitted that they went to Black Rock Canyon for a while. At the end of the interview, the detectives told Adamcik about the evidence they uncovered in Black Rock Canyon. Investigators showed him the partially burned notebook paper and he admitted that his handwriting was on the paper. They told him that he needed to be honest about what happened that night, but Adamcik asked for an attorney, at which time investigators concluded the interview. Adamcik and his father spoke privately for a few moments in another room. When they joined the detectives again, Adamcik was arrested. Draper went to the Bannock County Jail on the night of September 27. The following day, investigators were interested in another interview. This would be his fourth in the span of a few days. Police attempted to get into contact with his parents, but were unable to. Draper stated that he was open to speaking with investigators without them present. This time, the investigators pushed to find out just how Draper fit into the murder. Up to this point, the blame was squarely on Adamcik. However, an officer asked if perhaps Adamcik had forced him to stab Cassie in an attempt to prove himself to the other male. Draper acknowledged that this was true. He then admitted to stabbing Cassie 4 times in the leg and chest, first. It wasn't enough though. Adamcik reiterated that Cassie had to die. 13 minutes later, Draper concluded the interview and asked to see his parents. Despite their best efforts, Adamcik and Draper were arrested on September 27, 2006, on charges of first-degree murder as well as conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. At trial, the prosecution revealed that Draper had said he was inspired by Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, who committed the Columbine High School massacre. Later, Adamcik was said to have been inspired by the Scream horror film franchise. Draper was convicted on April 17, 2007. Adamcik was convicted on June 8, 2007. On August 21, 2007, based on being convicted of first-degree murder, each received a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, and 30 years to life for being convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. The Stoddarts filed a civil lawsuit against the Idaho School District in 2010 for failing to be proactive regarding the young men's threats. They believed the district, and more specifically, the school the teens attended, were negligent. This stems from the reality that majority of the videos were recorded in the school, including clips of the boys writing out their kill list as well as the instructions for murdering Cassie. The family felt it was worth pursuing legally. However, the Supreme Court felt that this brutal slaying was not something that could have been known. They dismissed the case. The Supreme Court received separate appeals for the young men. One for Adamcik in September of 2010 and Draper's in April of 2011. Both were denied full appeals. However, Draper's charges for conspiracy were dropped because it was believed that the jury was misled. In July 2015, Adamcik met with 6th District Magistrate Judge Mitchell W. Brown to discuss some issues he had with the handling of the case entirely. He believed that if he had been allowed to have character witnesses at the initial trial, then he'd have received a more lenient sentence. He went on to say that his former attorney led him and his parents to believe it would only create more damning evidence. This is just narcissism at its finest. To be convicted of a crime that has a recorded confession directly after the attack featuring both young men in all their haphazard glory, and to still fight the sentence just speaks volumes of their mental state and their shared belief that they're not responsible for their actions. Isn't that what the pair wanted, notoriety for being brutal killers? Well, this is what that looks like. A life sentence to pay for the life they heinously stole. Thankfully, in March 2016, Judge Brown denied his appeal. In keeping pace with his previous attempt, Adamcik again tried to appeal, but this time, the appeal was sent to the Idaho Supreme Court. The subsequent hearing occurred on November 9, 2017. In November 2019, Adamcik attempted to appeal his conviction but was denied once more. I hope you all have a great day today, and this is all I have for this case. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, please subscribe and comment and leave a thumbs up down below, and thanks for watching once again.